Have you ever met a dog who felt he just wasn't taken seriously enough? Let me introduce you to Barnaby, a magnificent Samoyed, a giant cloud of white fluff with a perpetually earnest soul. Barnaby, despite his breed's famous smile, yearned for one thing: gravitas, that heavy, important feeling he saw in old portraits of generals and judges. One day, his human Eleanor brought home an antique steamer trunk. Barnaby, ever the investigator, sniffed around and discovered a treasure hidden beneath Mathetan gloves. A squashed 1920s charcoal grey felt fedora. Using the careful balance he'd perfected during Triton nose training, he managed to shimmy it onto his head. The brim sat perfectly above his intelligent brown eyes. The transformation was instant. He was no longer Barnaby the bouncy. He was Barnaby the beleaguered chief inspector. The moment he appeared in the living room, Eleanor choked on her tea. "Barnaby, oh my God. You look like a fluffy, dignified mushroom cloud who just misplaced his spectacles." Barnaby, of course, took this as the highest praise. From that day forward, the fedora was non-negotiable. He wore it everywhere, completely oblivious to the hilarious spectacle he created for the rest of the world. The dog park, usually a place of joyous chaos, fell silent when Barnaby trotted in, head held high, fedora slightly askew but resolute. The other dogs, who normally couldn't care less about fashion, just paused. A tiny chihuahua named Penelope, who usually screamed insults at pigeons, let out a nervous whimper. An elderly gentleman, Mr. Henderson, who'd lost his glasses, approached Eleanor. "Excuse me, madam," he whispered, pointing a trembling finger at Barnaby. Is that ... is that the park supervisor? He looks very serious about the leash law." Eleanor, trying her best not to laugh, replied, "He's just Barnaby, sir. He's very serious about squirrels." "But the hat," Mr. Henderson insisted. "And that powerful, watchful gaze. He has the air of a man who understands quarterly budgeting." Just then, a Dalmatian puppy, thinking Barnaby was a respected canine officer, spontaneously dropped his squeaky toy and sat at attention. Barnaby, seeing this as a clear invitation to play, let out a single, dignified woof, and then, in a catastrophic lapse of gravitas, began spinning in a tight, joyous circle. The fedora whipped through the air like a tiny, grey tornado. It was not professional. It was hysterical. Mr. Henderson adjusted his imaginary spectacles and muttered, "Ah, an undercover joy agent. Brilliant disguise." Barnaby's next adventure in dignity took place at the Corner Grocer, a shop run by a wonderfully stressed woman named Agnes. Agnes had a famously grumpy, fat black cat named Bartholomew, who silently judged customers from atop the artisanal olive oil display. Eleanor brought Barnaby in, who, with his fedora on, felt he had decorum to spare. As Eleanor shopped for bananas, Barnaby spotted Bartholomew. He saw the cat as a crucial witness in an unsolved case. The location of Eleanor S. emergency cheddar cheese stash, Barnaby began to stalk him. His white fur blended seamlessly with the dairy aisle's tile floor, leaving only the dark grey fedora gliding eerily toward the olive oil shelf. Agnes looked up just in time to see a formal hat, seemingly floating 3 inches off the ground, intently sniffing the rear end of her cat. A woman nearby gasped, "Did you see that?" The animal control officer brought in a new kind of drone. Bartholomew, feeling the hot breath of the fedora on his tail, had had enough. With a noise like a rusty chainsaw, he launched himself off the shelf, scattering pyramids of imported Italian tomato cans. Clatter. Boom. Thwack. Barnaby, stunned by his witness's sudden retreat, stepped back, snagging Eleanor's leash. This pulled her arm, which knocked a massive display of mangoes off the counter. The store fell silent, punctuated only by the rolling of fruit. Barnaby stood amidst the tropical wreckage. The fedora spun 180 degrees so the brim covered his mouth, making him look like a very disappointed snowman who had just witnessed the complete collapse of the stock market. Agnes simply sighed, "That dog and that hat. They're a menace to my sales displays." The pinnacle of Barnaby's quest for gravitas came at the annual Pets and Produce Charity Parade. Eleanor had signed him up, pleading, "Barnaby, you're walking next to a beagle wearing fairy wings. Please don't look so judgmental." But Barnaby, his fedora secured with a new chin strap, marched with the precise rhythmic footfalls of a decorated veteran. He completely ignored the golden retriever dressed as a hot dog bun. He was Barnaby, and he was serious. Halfway through the route, disaster struck. A low-flying kite, shaped like a giant, grinning pancake, and piloted by a 6-year-old with questionable motor skills, swooped too close. In a flash of fabric and string, the kite's tail snagged Barnaby's fedora, yanking it off his head. At the very same moment, a tiny, maple syrup-drenched mini pancaker prop from the kite detached and landed, plop, squarely on Barnaby's head. The crowd erupted. Barnaby, unaware of the swap, felt the sudden, sticky weight. He assumed it was a new, even more dignified hat perhaps, one reserved for heads of state. He straightened his back, puffed out his chest, and continued marching with even greater pomp. He was no longer Chief Inspector Barnaby. He was now Barnaby, the fluffy white dog wearing a ridiculously small, syrup-soaked pancake. The beagle in fairy wings howled with laughter. Even Bartholomew, the cat, watching from a window, seemed to crack a smile. Barnaby, basking in the unprecedented reaction, thought, "Ah, success. They finally recognize my true gravitas." Later that evening, after Eleanor had carefully washed the syrup from his fur, Barnaby found his old fedora on the porch. He looked at the hat, then at his reflection. He was still magnificent, still fluffy, still smiling. He finally realized the hat hadn't given him gravitas. It had given him adventure. It had given him the license to be the most absurd, most formally dressed, most highly misunderstood dog in the neighborhood. Barnaby pushed the fedora onto his head, this time placing it deliberately backward. He let out a cheerful, loud woof. A noise that sounded less like an inspector and more like a dog ready for a midnight snack. Eleanor smiled. Ready for a walk, you ridiculous thing. Barnaby tilted the backward fedora in assent. He might not have achieved dignity, but he had mastered the art of being a perfectly preposterous dog, and that, he decided, was much more fun. Thank you so much for watching Barnaby's story. If you enjoyed his hilarious adventures, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales. We'll see you in the next one.